2024, we're receiving only $5 million because of all the calculations that take place, because of the decline in enrollment, because of the 3-year average, because of everything that's going on in the system. We are only receiving the effective increase based on option two of $5 million, when traditionally we would have received $12.5 million. So you see that such a big discrepancy. You might recollect that from previous conversations that we had. This is what happens when we have a stable enrollment, and this how much, or if we have an enrollment growth, this is how much significant dollars we will receive as a district if we would had a stable enrollment. But again, because of COVID, because of everything that happened, the funding formula, the hold harmless, the emergency condition allowance, we're only able to see $5 million. So, based on what we see on the forecast that you have received in your agenda, this is what we're forecasting the opt-in options for us. In this upcoming year, as I mentioned to you, we're going to opt for the emergency condition allowance. We calculated the revenue for 23-24, and based on that, we are going to be on the student center funding formula. That's option number one. In 24-25, based on our estimates, we most likely will be on the whole harmless unless we increase our enrollment significantly. And as a reminder, the whole harmless will expire in 24-25. And then 25-26 and on, because they're no more whole harmless and this emergency conditional allowance it's on an annual basis, we are projecting that we will be on the student center funding formula moving forward as well. So what are we doing? What are we going to do next? So we're going to present to you the tentative budget as you see on your packet on June 9th. But in the meantime, we have and we will continue advocating for increased ongoing funding to the funding formula. As I mentioned to you, this is a very good first step, but it's not done. We're not done. They need to continue to increase. We need to make sure that we start getting ready for what most of us are calling the fiscal cliff in 24-25, 25-26, to make sure that the rates for the student center funding formula are as high as possible as we can. But that's what we keep advocating, that they need to invest, that they need to continue putting money into the base increase, base allocation. So we are going to continue advocating for that. We're also going to continue advocating that the state puts additional non-Prop 98 funding to fund our retirement costs. As you know, CalSTRS and CalPERS, we had a couple of conversations about that in a few months, in a few meetings before. That is extremely expensive for us, extremely expensive. So we are requesting that additional funds get put into to help us to pay for this cost, but this could not be from Prop 98, because if they're from Prop 98, then they're just taking it from our own pot and giving it back to us. So that's not what we want. We want it out of the non-Prop 98. As you saw in the previous slides, the one-time money is something very significant. So we want to protect that. We want to protect that from getting distributed any other way or for any other initiatives. As I mentioned to you, there's a lot of talks about initiative fatigue. So we don't want any more new initiatives. What we want to protect the funding that is in there, the block grant, the deferred maintenance, and the student retention enrollment efforts, because we see that at least those three parts of money will significantly impact in a positive way our district. So we want to make sure that we continue advocating for that. We need to continue our district-wide enrollment efforts. As you will see in the future months, you will see a lot of advertising, marketing, do enrollment initiatives, etc., that we're going to continue doing to make sure that we increase our enrollment as we move forward for the future years. We are going to continue making budget adjustments based on final state budget. The final state budget will come probably in August, so that's when we'll make final adjustments. We'll have a strategy session with you on August 25th, and then September 8th, we'll take the budget for your adoption, and hopefully you'll approve at that time. And that's pretty much what I have. That is a quick presentation just to let you know what's going on at the state level. You do have the numbers with the agenda. I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was looking for my questions. Trustee Virzell.
Thank you. So a few pages back, where you have the graphic that shows the additional ongoing revenue if SBCCD were to receive funding based on FDTS, where it shows us being 7.5 million plus just a little bit difference. Do we need the full 7.5 million? Is it based on fixed fees that or fixed, expenses that we can't do anything about? Or is it all not completely needed because we have fewer students?
So we always need the funding. We're never going to reject any funding that comes our way, right? As you see in the forecast, we will have deficit spending in the upcoming years. So we are using right now in our forecast that we have in the projected tentative budget, we have revenue that we have from our commercial buildings that we're using to balance the budget. So if this revenue, the $7.5 million, that it will be in our pocket, we wouldn't have the need to utilize those funds in the budget. But we are in need to use those funds, and that's why we are using them. But
Okay.
we do need those funds.
Yeah, I totally understand that portion of it. Are there any reduced expenses as a result of a lower number of FTES?
Yes, one of the things that we did, and Larry can jump in as well, I think it's in the building as well. One of the things that we did, we asked the colleges to really start looking at their budget instead of streamlining the budget. We have done that over the past, actually, couple of years. Because of COVID, we saw a significant amount of reduction in a lot of expenditures, especially in utilities, especially in contracts, and especially in maintenance for the buildings, etc. So one of the things that Larry with his team did with the campuses as well, they really worked on streamlining the budgets. We have done that across all of the funds, actually, including KVCR as well. And we have reduced the budget significantly based on what we anticipate is going to happen as we open the campuses.
Yeah.
Thank
But-
you.
But just an observation, because we're constantly talking about increasing enrollment and all of that, but somewhere in here, there must be a base number that it takes to operate both campuses, KVCR, the district office. So what does it take as far as full-time equivalent students to be able to fund that? So what is the base cost? I mean, when we talk about reducing, I always use the example that if we have 10 students and each one of those students is not taking a full load, it would take 6 of them or 4 of them taking one class to make one full-time equivalent student. But it takes the effort of counseling, enrollment, all of those things are a full service, whether that student is taking 3 units or is taking 12 units. So there's a base cost to just open the doors. And when we go back to person, I mean, and you say we've streamlined the budget, but now we have to increase, and it doesn't matter whether that class has 20 students or 60 students, right? It doesn't make any difference. We have certain maintenance things, we have certain things that have to get done. To open the doors, what does it cost us? Not considering COVID, not considering all of that.
So our best estimate, Madam Chair, is that we have to, for our colleges to operate, is what we're presenting to you. The tentative budget that you have received in your agenda packet. That's what we're estimating we need in expenditures in order to operate both campuses and the district and the SO as well. It's $129 million. That's how much we think we need. based on everything that is occurring. The revenues that we're generating is about $128 million. We expect some savings from the Golden Handshake, but the cost that we're estimating that we're going to need is $129 million. Keep in mind that out of the $129 million on the unrestricted general fund, about 87% of that is based on personnel, based on salaries and benefits. Those are what we truly call fixed costs, right? Those are what we call truly fixed costs. But there are other additional fixed costs that happen. There's software that takes place that we need. There's electricity, there's utilities, there's things that we really need to make sure that we have in order to open the doors for our students, right? So there's very little discretionary amounts in here for other expenses and services for classroom supplies. You'll see in the packet that you received that that's a very small portion of our budget. The majority of our budget is on staffing and benefits. That's what we call those are the necessities. That's what is needed for us to open the campuses and to make sure that we're servicing our students.
All right. Trustee Houston, and then followed by Trustee Williams.
Similar related question, if we were at what we would consider, I'm just going to say full capacity of students, if we weren't in a declining enrollment situation, what would that $129 million budget need to be?
So I'm going to ask maybe the presidents to help me out a little bit on this one as well. One of the things that happens with low enrollment, our efficiencies go down, right? Because we have less students in the classroom, but there's still a certain number of classes, sections that we have to offer. So, and that's what I meant with the fixed costs, right? So at the current levels that we have, we can accommodate a lot more students because we have classes, let's say, for example, with 25 students, but that class can easily accommodate 35 students. And it's not additional cost that we have to add to our budget. It's just that we need to make sure that we get our students into the classroom. Presidents, anything else that I misspoke or you want to
just before you answer, so we're not, folks aren't necessarily prepared for some of the questions that we have. Can we make sure that we get the questions recorded properly and then just get some follow-up on it so we're not just having to make up stuff on the spot? Because some of this stuff needs to be researched, so.
Okay. You had that was your comment?
No, I just wanted to, because the question was, I need to go research your problem kind of question. So,
Okay.
So that we can get good answers for the stuff.
If I understand the question correctly, wow, this is a really effective microphone today. If I understand the question correctly, how we deal with up and downs of enrollment is largely, almost entirely done through our flex cap capabilities with our part-time faculty. So when we reduce the number of sections, we are essentially reducing the number of sections that are offered to part-time faculty. And we consolidate those sections as much as possible. So we make sure sections are available in a broad spectrum of days and times and modalities. But that is sometimes our only tool in adjusting to meet with the budgets, because as Jose was mentioning, a large percentage, closer to 90% for Crafton is people. And so when we say, what does the budget need to be, really the question is, what do we value in still funding? So beyond the pivoting with the part-time and the schedule, we have to make decisions about, do we value X service and we're going to offer that any longer? Or are we going to trim our student services offices to be only open till 5 p.m. because we often staff in the evening hours with part-time counselors and things like that?
Thank you. Williams is next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then Reyes.
I was just going to add, with the class schedule, there's course caps on some of the courses, so you can only put X amount in there. So say it's 20 or 25 just due to the modality. So just an additional
Yeah.
function. So we couldn't say put 50 in that class because, say, it's a applied tech class, right? The lab doesn't hold that many students. So it's just balancing out our capabilities, just to add to what Kevin was mentioning.
And if I could just build on that, so we saw a presentation by our faculty, Crafton's Faculty Senate around course caps. We have to look at the whole comprehensive schedule and aim for a 35 student average across all classes. So like our radiology classes have 8 students in them because they're different codes, and then, our larger lecture classes like anthropology, history, they have larger 55 caps. And we work towards getting back to the 35. And it goes back to the original FTS WISH funding formula of 17.5 FTS. So that's the magic number we aim at, although we have many more additional costs regulated to us from the state for surrounding services and things like that we have to pay for that we didn't have to 20 years ago. So that 17.5 is a little bit of a myth number, but it's what we try to get to as far as course efficiencies. Just building on what Dr. Thayer said.
Before I go to Trustee Williams, I want to find out, are we still looking at the same way we looked at how we determined, it was 525 as the number, right? And it didn't make sense, having been a dean at one time, and a department chair, trying to fit 50 students into a Spanish 101 in order to be able to offer a Spanish 4 that only had 15. And so the quality of education suffers. I mean, it does. But that was the only tool that we had. So I feel for you. I feel for you. And at the same time, we have labs that only take 20 at the most, and some takes only 15. And it's the quality of what we offer and how we train our students that so that's not part of the funding formula. We're always talking about efficiency and have we done this and we have done that, but the formula is wrong. The formula is wrong. And I look at the legislative committee and say to you, you have to be advocates for us that good education is not a packed, like at UCLA, 600 students in the, History 101, right? That's not who we are. And we do a heck of a lot better job than that class. You and I talked about it. We don't talk about the dropout rate in the freshman year of the 4-year schools because it's atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. But we do talk about the dropout rate and the low enrollment in the community college, where we're open to everybody. But but I look at the legislative committee, the people who have some palanque in Sacramento, right?
Yeah.
That we have to advocate to have a different funding formula. It has to be different. And we're expected to accept the world. And we used to use the example that the UCs took 10%, the CSUs took 20%, and we took the world. We didn't care as long as you were 18 years of age and could benefit, and we now are taking them even younger. So, and if our legislators don't understand that and the difference, that's the role you guys have to do.
The questions that I had, just made me think about what's within our control. And, now being on the BOG for a year now, I think it's really important as, we being locally elected officials that we're careful about what we depend on the state for, because it's a waiting game. And, I've been on the board for 9 years, and we've been talking about getting the funding formula changed.
That's right.
And you guys have an incredible amount of patience, and I just think about the amount of time of energy that we could just put into developing our own revenue. We probably would, be able to do it. And so, but Jose and Chair, I'd like to ask for, some of this to be assigned to the Finance Committee, but we got to figure out how to contextualize this information in a, because this is stuff is really complex. You're talking about, you said 5.7, he said 7 something over there, and then we were talking about the WISC, and it's real complex, and the board does not have a really good finite way to measure or not whether the colleges are staying within some type of target or guidepost. And like, we need a guidepost that says, like, we want to serve X number of students this year, regardless of the services that you want to provide. And like, have a way that we can incrementally measure whether we're getting to that point or not. Because I still don't understand, before the pandemic, I thought we were in decline in enrollment, and, you know, we were getting growth funds, and I don't know if we ever got back to the original base, and it just seems like you lose the context for what are we doing again, like, in terms of, like, scale. Like, I never get a good grasp on what the scale it is, what's the scale of what we're doing, and then your question is not really clearly answered, like, what's the max that we can hold just based on our physical space? How much does that cost? And, you know, what kind of revenue is needed for that in comparison to, well, what do we actually have? Like, how many students are in our classrooms now? How much does that cost? We're going to be opening back up, and there's going to be additional costs because people are going to have to come out and clean the bathrooms now, and they weren't cleaning the bathrooms before. And so if there was a way to just have a simple metrics that, based on how many people you think you want to, as your goal for this year, and we just have a simple way that the board can measure, because I'm looking in the budget, I'm like, okay, well, how much are we spending on outreach to go get these students? What does it cost us to acquire a student? Like, what is do we even have a student acquisition number? Like, how much does it cost to get one enrollment? And so I just think we as a board need some very simple metrics that we can look at over a period of time that you all say is reasonable, so that we can see if what we're spending is going to lead us to where we want to go. And so I think that requires more conversation, but this stuff is really complicated, and I don't know how you keep track of it all.
Well, I appreciate you acknowledging it's complicated, because to achieve what you're saying, a simple metric, 70% of our funding comes from butts and seats, the traditional. 30% is through success metrics. And then you throw the categorical funding and specialized funding on top of that, which is outside of the general fund. There is no simple.
But is there a way to put it in context? Because the way that we talk about it, it seems like the goal changes it's like, I don't know if we're going to make it. Like, what are we doing? I know how you run a business.
If I give it an example, and it goes back to, we've talked about another subject, and I'll be quiet, I'm sorry, Chancellor, AB 705 and our remedial education. We are down in enrollment in part because we are better at how we offer math and English courses and our success rates in it. And so when we say we're down in enrollment, we need to chase more enrollment, it's a misnomer, because that enrollment went away because we artificially created it by creating a remedial pathway where students were taking units over and over and over and over again, and that was a part of our enrollment. The state regulated repeatability rules in 2011, 2012. Students can't take the same course more than 3 times. That decimated our man-made enrollments in activities classes. Really, a lot of our activities in kinesiology classes, our enrollment significantly dropped over the last decade because of that rule. That's not enrollment we're going to get back. So it's complicated because of that too.
But how do we just put it in context? Because if we're saying, if enrollment equals revenue for us though, because I don't think that's changed, right?
Correct.
So we still need revenue, right? And it seems like our revenues are going down, right? But are we?
The revenues are going down because of the enrollment.
But our expenses are not going down.
Not in all areas, no.
Yeah, so even overall though, like.
But our revenues are not going down because of the emergency condition allowance.
But
our revenues are not going down.
Because we're puffed up right now. We're getting, but pull all of that out of there. Like, how long are we going to depend on the state, yo? Like, at some point in time, they're going to have to pull the rug out of this thing. And like, how do we prepare ourselves to keep doing, like what you're saying, to be able to have the high quality service regardless? And I'm asking, I'm trying to figure out, because I see within here, the thing that I see we got control over is local revenues. How do we increase local revenues or that? Because the state revenues is dependent on our ability to get the legislator to do something. So that's a long shot. We keep working on that. But what are the things that we have direct control over that if we put energy and investment in, then it's just really up to us instead of waiting on, I mean, say Eloise, say, Frank, I don't want to talk to you today. What are we going to do? Now we got to get him, he got to take on the day, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so like, what can we do? Yeah, like, how do we put stuff more in our control is like, and I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm just saying we have to be thinking about it, because they're like, at the conversations, they're not like, there's no new revenue coming. It's not happening, like, and it's like 5 years, the answer you're talking about is like a 5-year fix, Jose, like asking them to fix this, it's like, it's not gonna happen this year.
Okay. Trustee Reyes.
Yeah, I have Jose, a question for you in regards to understanding that COVID really hit us hard. Everybody, low enrollment. Is there a possibility that we can actually try to do something, not only as a district, but as a system, whereby we can convince the governor that the surplus is pretty good right now? He can do those things. How do you see us being more effective when it comes to don't penalize us? It was not our fault. Everybody's gone through that in terms of enrollment, people are not coming back and all that. If they want to bring people back, they're going to have to be creative. How do you think, from a financial perspective, meeting with the committee or the governors, I don't know if the state chancellor will have any say whatsoever in terms of the budget. How do you see us not being penalized for, it's not our fault, low enrollment it's hit everybody.
Yeah, and and I wanna go back to what Trustee Houston mentioned, that we haven't lost revenue, and because we have been protected by either the emergency condition allowance or the hold harmless clause that we have. Because of those two, we haven't been in a way penalized as it could have been with the loss of enrollment that we had. We had a 24% enrollment decline, as you might recollect from previous conversations.
Yeah.
Prior to COVID. Prior to COVID, we were growing as an institution. Our enrollment was the highest that it had ever been. Keep in mind that we also had the promise of that artificially inflated our enrollment as well. But we were at the highest enrollment possibly before COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we were protected from revenue declines by either the emergency condition allowance or the hold harmless. Moving forward, as I mentioned to you, the conversations that we need to continue having with the legislation is that this is a great first step. This is a great first step in putting money into the student center funding formula, but it shouldn't stop there. We need to continue within the next 2 to 3 years to make sure that we continue advocating that they continue putting money into the student center funding formula. Because as you know, I'm preaching to the choir, but as you know, we are the lowest funded higher education system in the state of California. So we need to make sure that we continue advocating for that. I'm not saying that this budget is wrong. I'm not saying that anything like that. But what I'm saying is that it's a great first step, but we're not there yet. We need to continue advocating for additional base increases to the funding formula.
Okay.
Well, part of the answer then could be something like, you should organize something with us, meaning you, our chief person in finance, get some board members, go to Sacramento, advocate for that, educate that. As Gloria is saying, this is crazy. Every year it's tough to be a president or a chancellor, because you're always, and this is the time to do it, to try to convince the governor. If we're going to have an impact so they can see there's still money, we may not have this chance in about 2 or 3 years, because the budget is going to be real bad. Right now, it's good.
Jose, with the enrollment, like, what's the time period when you say this is the highest, we were at our highest enrollment, you're saying, because I thought, like, and I'm just remembering from, chancellor to chancellor, there was, a period of, we were going after growth, and then there was a period where we started declining, And so what are you saying about we were at our highest enrollment before
Prior to
prior,
COVID, we were at the highest enrollment. That's what,
Yeah.
yes.
but highest enrollment comparative to what? The highest enrollment in?
Since I've been here, I can tell. I've been here 9 years, and it's been the highest before COVID. Pre-COVID, we were at the highest enrollment since I've been here.
Before 705.
But Jose, at one time.
We had like
We were
25,000.
punished for having too much growth.
Transition into.
There was a cap.
Okay.
There was a cap put on the community colleges. And so we worked very hard to get enrollment, and then we had to pay for anything that was over the cap. We had to take it out of our budget. And so that was the other thing that was,
Unfunded.
You're
Yeah.
chasing
Yeah.
butts and seeds to a
so
certain point.
we were
and then-
constantly, trying to figure out what that magic number was so that we wouldn't get penalized. And at the same, and now the story is completely different. Now we have to find the students to come to us. And so now we're being penalized because we don't have enough students. We have done that whole circle, right? So I know that we have to pass a budget, tentative budget, that's on our agenda for the June meeting, right? So we have to put together a tentative budget. The issues that have been brought up by board members and yourself are long-term issues. And probably we need to think about, in Finance Committee, to isolate those issues, those things that we want to work on, and the same thing in the Legislative Committee. What do we want to advocate for? The biggest issue for those of us who have been in the system, we have seen so many pilot programs, so many things that were funded for 2 or 3 years, and they were successful, but they were successful for a very small number. We could not institutionalize those programs because we couldn't afford them with the amount of money that was being used for each student. I think the only thing that has survived is the Puente program, our EOPS, that kind of thing, but they depend every year because they're categorical programs, right? So how do we change that mindset, not of our legislators? When we have gone to Sacramento, every one of them has a story of when they were a student,
Yeah.
as if that makes them an expert.
Can I ask that we add something to that
Aggravating.
strategy?
But I mean, it's just, and I have to be careful too, because even though I was in the system, right, it was a long time ago. Rules have changed.
Yeah.
But this one-time money, the categorical projects that have survived, that are still successful, have never been internalized and made part of the regular funding. We're always looking to make sure that the categoricals get funded every year, instead of being part of our base.
Yeah.
So you're the Finance Committee, you're the Legislative Committee.
I'm gonna put
I
the,
hope you have those discussions in your committees.
I would like to move that we study the feasibility of, so going to the International Commerce Conference was just a eye-opening experience, and really just looking at how cities get retail and economic development investments. It's to cities' benefits to increase the educational levels of their residents. In New Jersey, community colleges get general fund money from their counties.
Yeah.
And so within our legislative strategy, can we study the feasibility of getting the cities in the county, in our district, to invest ongoing revenue? Like in my city, I just saw on my Edison bill, we have this Rialto UUT tax. It's $14 frickin' dollars. But the point is, would cities invest, or, John, would a city say, hey, look, we're going to ask our residents, we're going to tax them $2 to support the community colleges for ongoing revenue? Can we look at how feasible it is to raise local revenues, continue to ask the legislator, but ask the cities, because it's to their benefit for their residents to go into school, and that's how they get economic development dollars, in part by having higher education levels. And so is that something that we can study? I'm not saying move forward on it, but at least put it out there and see, survey the cities and just see what their thoughts are on it.
Yeah.
Well, you
Who
know,
else?
I remember that I did have a
Did I have
conversation.
somebody else? John, did you have your hands up?
No.
Oh, okay, okay, so.
Because I remember Diana had a real good idea in regards to the project across the street from Valley College. I wanted to make sure that the Board of Supervisors, Joe Bachman mainly, because he was, become part of this, because you're right. I mean, our success is their success. If we don't educate them, they're going to do it. And he was willing to listen. I just spoke with him that. There's also the cities. I think, and it's bound to, I remember that one time they were trying to get airlines, the big corporations to come to San Bernardino. One of the questions that they asked is, what's the level of education of your population when they're going to go to Norton Air Force Base? And when they said it's going to be a little bit higher because we're doing this and that, the companies were able to say, okay, I'll consider moving there. Because I remember I had conversations with Jerry Lewis. They were willing to move over here. So you're right. We all need to work together. It's not just the community college working by itself. Same thing with the county. We want to make the whole region successful, but it's going to take everybody. I mean, when you were in the legislature, you probably worked real hard to try to get our region to be recognized, because I know that they always talk about the San Diego, the Los Angeles, the San Francisco. They always left us out. This has changed thanks to the leadership of some certain individuals. We should continue to do that. Take advantage of those opportunities, because everybody wins. Even the people in San Francisco are now recognizing, Los Angeles recognizing that, you know what, they're successful, we're all going to be successful, but it's going to take, we're changing the minds of, you're right, Gloria, it's going to take a lot of work, but we can start doing it. We can start the process.
I guess one of the things that I can say to our standing committees is that we need to do, just like we did for our district, you need a strategic plan. A legislative strategic plan, a financial strategic plan for the district that we can follow. I mean, we don't have any choice. Right now, we have to adopt a budget on June 9th. So, but the ongoing work in order to change, even if it's 1 or 2 degrees of the system, has to be done in the committees. And so, and with staff supervision and resources and all of that. I do have a question that has nothing to do with the budget. Oh, John.
I just wanted to note that I think it would be very challenging in response to Joseph's comments to try to get our fellow elected officials in local city and county government to assign any of their funding or to raise new funding under their auspices for our use. I think that would be more challenging than would be direct appeals to the legislature for increases. I think the effort put into the local stuff would be less successful, and it would be more productive to put that effort into there. Local governments have all kinds of taxes. I mean, at one time, when I was in the city council there and then mayor, we had some battles over utility taxes, and I was proud at the time because I had actually eliminated utility tax for a while. I think it was reinstituted after I left, but it's very challenging. I think there's other things we can do with local governments that would be in-kind things they can do that are mutually beneficial. And I think we should look for those efforts. However, right now, Sacramento is, I think, where we need to target our efforts, as well as at the federal level. And we are in an unusual situation at both of those levels, in that the state is in better shape than it often is, and the chances are better for us getting things, as, you know, tomorrow we'll be seeing that the federal government's done through Congressman Aguilar's help for KVCR. I think that's where we're going to put our efforts, and I look forward to continuing to work with Frank and Ann and with our colleagues up in Sacramento. Not only do we have some particularly close relationships with a few members, obviously, with Eloise and others, but there are several members right now who previously served as community college trustees. And I think we should...
We're off topic. We're off topic.
Okay.
We're off topic. Yeah.
Thank you.
that's right.
We're
Thank you.
talking about a fiscal cliff in here, and we're talking about approving a budget on June the 2nd, and we're saying,
June 9th.
well, June 9th, whatever the date is, everything that we're discussing is like one-time funding, and we need a sustainable, ongoing source. And so I say that the topic is appropriate because you're asking us to approve a structural deficit in the budget, and, or like, you know, that's the direction that we're going in. And like, I'm not in favor of that if you can't show me where you're addressing future revenues, and we got to have that as a conversation.
We have to adopt a budget, otherwise we can't move forward.
I'm not saying don't adopt it, I'm saying you got to talk about future revenue.
You have to do this on June 9th.
Yeah, but you still...
The ongoing work isn't going to be done, you know, in one fell swoop. It's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of planning. You are going to have to come up with a plan, not a one-year plan, a three-year plan, something. We have to convince the people in Sacramento that when they have money, it can't just be pilot project after pilot project and a little initiative that only lasts 1 or 2 years. It has to be made part of the system. So that is a separate conversation.
We've directly reviewed a model where there's public enterprise, where the institution is taking ownership of its revenues itself and not just dependent on the state. Everything that is being said is dependent on forces outside of ourselves, and that really puts us in a dependent status. It doesn't put us in the driver's seat.
But if we're talking about a model, then that presentation has to be made to all of us, and we all have to agree that that's what the direction we want to go.
Yeah.
And we haven't had that.
Well, that's why we're discussing it.
Yeah, okay. But it needs to, if it needs to come...
Given a plan, though.
What?
We're being given a plan. There's a plan.
Yeah.
But again, remember, we're going in a hole, though. Like, the plan takes us into a deficit.
Well,
It
that's all
does.
based on what the legislative is people are funding us with. What he's talking about is developing a whole other area that supplements this. Right?
If we believe, I mean, we might as well let the Board of Governors take over, because if we're saying, hey, we're just going to depend on what you say, then we're saying local control is no longer important. If local control is important, we got to solve the issue. We can't wait for the state. If it's local control, we're in control of the system, so it's all about what we do.
Well...
And that's got to be part of the plan. It can't be, let me ask these folks.
That's why I'm talking about the standing committee, look on a strategic plan to bring that about. I mean, we discuss it and discuss it and discuss it, and then we don't do anything. So...
My comments are in the public record, so...
All right. No, I'm not, but I really do think that that's where it needs to come from. That's where you can have more discussion, more information. This has to be approved because we need to continue our entity. And so I'm assuming that this will be on the agenda June 9th, that we will approve it. However, all of the other issues need to be worked on.
I just, if I can just continue on what you're saying, like, when you say we in the legislative committee or we in the finance committee, we as trustees, we're at the governance level, so we're going to provide direction to people who are going to provide a plan. I think the question is, who are the people that are going to do that? Because we have been discussing quite often, and this has come up in the past, but I don't know that we have the capacity because the day-to-day is such a heavy lift, right?
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a catch-22, a little bit, this circular conversation that we continue to have, like we want to have, the option for enterprise revenue, or we want to look at what industry can do to help support us. I mean, we want to look at like how many people are here on the visas from other countries because we don't have the skilled workforce to provide Esri and to provide Amazon and to provide, the companies that are coming to our region. Guess what? I mean, they're speaking,
So like
German and whatever they speak in Norway, I don't know that language, but in all of these facilities, because there aren't workers from our own region to do the work. So that's I think what we're talking about is how can we tap into that need?
Yeah.
Who is researching how many visas we have?
So I would imagine that we give that to our chancellor.
Yeah, but I feel like we've discussed it enough that it should already been in
Because I'm not going to go and talk to the presidents and
here.
say, you have to do this. We have to go to our,
running school.
to our leader, and you have heard the discussion, and the people who want to work on it.
One other, thanks. One other question, and Jose, if you could answer this one. On the plan that we're given here, how confident are we that the state will continue in this way until 2027? Because, I ask this because we're going to approve a budget that is inclusive of taking these paths over time while developing other revenue streams.
Yeah.
But we're going to get this budget, we're not going to get another one before then likely, so we're going to vote on that one. But we have to understand that it's likely, so tell me if I'm wrong, that 25, 26, 27 is not going to happen the way that they're telling us it's going to happen. So we may be approving a budget that has nothing to do with reality.
Every year.
Right? Every year. What we do. Every year. So we know what
do it
this
every
year's
year.
looks
We have
like.
been doing it for lots of years.
Yeah, it just seems like a ways
Jose's ready to
out.
answer it.
Can you?
And that's
Go ahead,
probably,
Jose.
and that's probably why we call it a tentative budget.
Go ahead, Jose.
Yeah. So what you will be hopefully approving in June is a tentative budget. There's still the final budget that comes to you in September, and we have a conversation in the month of August. Just to clarify, for the next 2 years, we are going to provide you a balanced budget on both years. As you see on the packet that we provided to you, there's a small increase to the fund balance, very small, so I call it balanced budget. The deficit spending happens in fiscal year 24-25, and that's when we start making the plans we're making right now to increase that enrollment. That's when we start planning. We have a very moderate, to answer your question, Trustee Vercel, is how certain are we that this is going to happen? We're pretty certain, what the plan that you see on the screen, that's what's going to happen. Next year, in 23-24, 2 years, I guess, because we're not in 22-23 yet. Most likely, the emergency condition allowance will be gone, and most likely, we, based on the funding that we see available, we're going to be on the student center funding formula that we see on the screen. Most likely, this will happen what you see on the screen because we are conservative when we come to forecasting. We have a 0.5% growth in our formula. We have some estimates for cost of living adjustments in the non staffing budget. We have step and column increases. We have benefit increases calculated in there. So we are pretty thorough when it comes to our forecasting. We are pretty confident in what you see on the screen that's what we think we're gonna end up. Of course, I do agree with Trustee Williams. They cannot control what the state does, so the state can come back and do something different. There also a possibility that recession or depression or whatever it is going to happen. So we don't know what's going to happen with economic, of the state or the world. But this at the moment with the data that we have available for us right now, we are very confident that this is what will take place.
All right, thank you, Jose.
I just want to add, remember, y'all, this is a strategy session, so we're supposed to come here and talk about strategies, not like just be educated and say, oh, here's the budget, pass the budget in June, so we're supposed, but Kevin said something that I thought was insightful about, well, what's important. You were talking about like the services and, I'm paraphrasing, but what's important. And then the way that we're funded, it does not allow us to focus on what we believe is important for our community, not for what the state says that is important, because the Inland Empire has different sets of challenges and needs. And so even when we were talking to Eloy, I'm asking him the same, what revenues, new revenues is the state willing to work on? Because he's saying the same thing. I got to go to the governor, I got to ask the legislator. So if the chancellor's office is saying what we're saying, it's like, shoot, like, come on. Everybody got to go ask somebody else. And I'm like, look, what can we do within our area? But like the promise. We funded the promise out of unrestricted funds because we thought that that was important, right? It got too expensive, it went away. He just said it increased enrollment, but it had to go away because we couldn't sustain it. But what would be the impacts of having a locally driven, sustainable, unrestricted funding source? How we get it, I don't know. Maybe we need to figure out how to sell some gelatos to Stater Brothers. I don't know what we need to do. But what can we do within our charter that makes sense for us, that we don't have to ask nobody for permission? And that's got to be part of the objectives. You don't have to have the projections in the budget, but it's got to be, somebody's got to have, we need a full-time FTS figuring that out. Somebody's got to be figuring out some revenue development. We need think about the impact if you had $1 million per campus and at the district office unrestricted, $3 million to just do what you believe is important with it. Ongoing, just a source. That's what we thought we were doing with these buildings. Now, we're having to redirect that for other issues. Great idea, but it was just not enough money. So, I'll just leave it at that. That's all I'm trying to get you to think about is locally driven source to do just what he said, what's important.
Yeah. Well, we have to come up, again, we have to come up with some kind of plan, a lot of strategic to figure it out.
We have the infrastructure.
We have made the first step with the monies that came from the reverse auction. I mean, those were first steps. And so what are our next steps after that? Are we ever going to have another reverse auction where we get 157 million? I doubt it, but, yeah. Dr. Gonzalez.
Nathan's fine. I think it would be really useful, at least for me, if at some future strategy session, we could actually have some presentations about what the strategies at the campuses for increasing enrollment actually are. One of the things that I thought about the first time I met you all in October was that there's a huge percentage of students who live within our district who attend community colleges outside of our district. And I don't know if anyone has ever attempted to do an analysis to understand why those students aren't coming to our colleges. Is it we don't offer the same programs that other colleges do, and that's where, so they're choosing to go elsewhere, or do they don't find our reputations as good as something else, or perceive that? Is that why they go elsewhere? Can they not get the classes? Is that why they go elsewhere? But the students who live in our district should be going to our schools, right?
Yep.
So some kind of session, I think that we can really understand better how we are going to meet this enrollment challenge would be really useful.
Yeah, I agree. John,
Yes,
Trustee Longville, I'm sorry.
Well, that's quite all right. I want to follow up on Nathan's comments. I don't see what I perceive to be a significant enough effort on the part of our district to exploit our current and inevitably temporary status as one of the top 4 community colleges as ranked by accreditation sources. And to some extent, that's something that just is a fluke thing that's going to change every time that the accreditation takes place, and sometimes we'll do better than others. But right now, we have an extraordinary ability to exploit that, and it seems to me like every single middle school within our jurisdiction, every student who's attending middle schools within our jurisdiction should be flooded with information, because by that time, their parents are beginning to think about, what's going to be happening after high school. And we should be flooding them with information. I can't imagine why, unless it's because of a course offering discrepancy, I can't think of why, any other reason, people who live in this area should be going to any other community colleges other than these top-ranked ones right here.
Yeah. I think at one time we had a concerted effort to talk to all of the school counselors and talk to the people at the high schools, and starting with freshmen, because we saw a phenomena that amongst high school counselors as to kind of a glory board. I'll call it a glory board. I have 2 students going to Harvard, and 5 students going to the UC system, and there was no place for the community colleges to brag about. And even within my family, they're all going to community colleges, but the draw, they're going to RCC for the beautician program. They're going to RCC because it still has a band, and so those students who are played in the high school bands go to RCC. We used to have a band at Valley College years ago. So it is that kind of, it's not one simple answer. It has to be approached by so many different ways. So many different ways.
What if we gave the lead counselors at the high schools our seats at graduation and let them get up there and interact with the students? That might get them a different view of, they might be excited to recruit people for us.
You have to talk to all the people who are doing counseling. And
I think Diana can
and
answer.
at one time, we did have some association in which counselors all got together. We brought them on campus. Some of it has been curtailed by COVID, and so many of these strategies were used before when we had a very high enrollment. So, I mean, we have to go back and see what worked, what didn't work. And again, the constant thing of tooting our own horn, and the biggest thing that I hear from students, because I'm out there, in fact, I have somebody who needs to get an appointment with a counselor right after this meeting. But I'm just saying, or that my nephew is
I think they get the point. We need to figure out revenues.
because he's going to play baseball for you, right? And my other one is going to Crafton because he's going to go into the drama department. So, I mean, they're programs and people they interact with that are the biggest draw. And the other thing is, we had for a while a constant thing of outstanding students from our campus, spotlighting students, and they in turn, we used social media, we used newspapers, we used radio, whatever, and those students draw. I know that guy. I know that guy.
So what was your request again? You wanted
So, I
to
mean,
see a study on-
and we haven't talked about that because we've been so doggone busy on trying to sustain ourselves and providing our education through, distance education. We've taken a blow. We've taken a blow with COVID. So now we have to get back in training.
So is it possible, can we organize some strategy session in the future to talk about and understand what the enrollment strategies are?
Yes, I hope so. And they do have them.
We'd be happy to do that, and we'll schedule which month we will do that. We'll get that out to you. One of the things, though, that as I'm sitting here doing more listening than talking, is that I think perhaps we as a district have not done a very good job at informing the Board of Trustees about what we're doing. Because I hear the questions, right? And in my head, I'm thinking, check, the colleges have done that. Check, the presidents and I have talked about that. And so, but what I've learned is that we need to push that information more consistently and maybe more thoroughly to the board.
It contextualizes it, because when you look at the budget, this thing, and then you say, oh, this line item is because we're doing outreach and you think that it's going to impact, it just contextual, because when you're just looking at it, you're like, all right, I see, but you've been doing the work every day, so it makes sense to you.
The other thing that we will do also for the board, when we put the presentation together, is to align it with the goals
Yeah.
that we just approved. You know, some of the things that we've heard is that I'm trying to figure out which goal that would fit under. And not that we won't do it if it doesn't fit under a goal, but I have to remind myself that the priorities are the goals.
So we need to be reminded about the goals frequently too, so that, because we could easily, you know, we'll get back up and then you'll have 21 instead of the original.
Right.
So,
Yes.
We should probably have a process within, I know with some meetings I've seen where the goals are built into the agenda as a
Yeah.
reminder, and then high-performing organizations, they brand the things that they say, and so I appreciate the things that you gave us back there.
Thank you.
And so, but keep reminding us too, because we'll take you off track easy.
Dinah,
Remember, we did it with, he had 21 goals, but because the conversations kind of dictate, and then those things are important things, but if you don't say, well, remember, I can have 5 things on the court at one time, which one you want me to bench so that I can add this new thing?
Right. Yeah.
well,
Trustee Reyes.
if you recall, Dinah, you can address this, because they used to have an annual conference for all the high school counselors from the whole area, and it was very successful. We brought them breakfast, we brought them lunch, we talked about programs, and it was very well communicated. I'm hoping that they still do that, because
That
I
is
think
still
it's
something that the colleges do on a regular basis, if at least once a year.
Yeah.
Sometimes twice a year. Even during COVID, when they had to do it remotely, they're very well attended.
Yeah.
They appreciate the efforts. They really appreciate the swag that they get.
Yeah.
But, you know, I want to remind us that as Executive Vice Chancellor Torres said, prior to COVID, we were on the upswing. You know, every year that I was president, right, throughout the district, not just Valley College, but throughout the district, there was increasing enrollment, right? And yes, the Promise Program shot it up. But even without the Promise Program, we still would have been growing enrollment. We are all still trying to figure out how to recoup our enrollment after COVID. None of us have ever strategized what happens after a pandemic.
Yeah,
So it's
never
new
had.
territory for all of us. We have some great ideas. We're working with our K-12s right now on dual enrollment. We have great ideas in working with EdCT on how to bring in revenue in that area. So there are a lot of things that we have been working on in this past 8-9 months. But as you all know, because all of you have worked close enough to the system, that these things take time because of the bureaucracy that we're in. And also, there are only certain ways in which we can spend money to make money, right? So we all constantly have to keep thinking about how are we using the taxpayers' dollars? How are we using categorical funding? Is it within the realm? Are we not, I forgot the word, supplanting? Are we not supplanting to move dollars around? We have these conversations on a weekly basis, the cabinet.
One of the things that we talked about, and Trustee Williams and I talked about it yesterday, and that is, how do we communicate? And so that's one of the things that we want to bring up in our retreat. Are we communicating as well as we could? Are we communicating our concerns so that, I have to say that Trustee Williams communicates. Whatever his concerns are, they are out there. So, but the rest of us, if we have concerns, how do we communicate them? Do we communicate them directly to our chancellor? Do we communicate them directly to the chair? How are we communicating? And then, because we do get an awful lot of written material. So do we have time, given our busy schedules, to go through all of that, all of that? Some of us do, some of us don't, and it depends maybe on the month and what season it is. How do we communicate those things that are important for recruitment? What are the most important things that we have to look forward to this coming year? That we have to, and I know it's sort of off the subject, but those are the most important things that we as trustees must know as we go out and talk and get interviewed or ask questions, or we're in family gatherings. How do I get an appointment for this? And I missed the FAFSA type of thing. Who do I talk to now? And so everybody assumes that because we're on the board, we know everything, right? So, and we don't, and so we haven't communicated as well as we should, probably to each other. And so we have to get better at it. We have to get better at it, because we are ambassadors. We are ambassadors, and we have to have some general knowledge of what's going on. I get always astounded when I go to one of the campuses of all the wonderful stuff that's going on. So, because when people approach us, they only approach us when they're having a problem. They don't approach us when they have had a wonderful experience, unfortunately. So how do we communicate better? How do we communicate better? It's something we have to discuss among ourselves.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Just as a point of stuff I'd like to see in the future, not today and not with this budget, okay? But at some point, when it's a line item, I'd love to see a detail and have a talk about that detail. So if there was a detail on a student acquisition or retention or something like that, I'd love to know what goes into it dollar-wise, and, then some discussion about what it is. Because it's really hard to do that, even when there's 3 hours set aside for a meeting, it's really hard to do that effectively. So if we could focus on what one of the colleges is doing, or one of the line items is doing, just one little area of it, we could have a nice substantive discussion, and maybe you could look at those things that we ask more questions about than others, or maybe we could just get together a list of questions that trustees want to hear about, or sections we want to hear about, and then provide a workshop on that so that we can be better educated in how you guys are already doing the good work you're doing that we don't know you're doing.
If I may add, it sounds like we're transitioning out towards the end of the meeting, maybe. I want to keep bringing us back to, and maybe end on a positive note, because it's been very deficit-oriented around enrollments dropping. Last night in our commencement starting, and I don't know Scott's numbers off the top, but I'm fairly certain they're similar. We are down in enrollment, by Jose noted 24%. We had a 34% increase in the number of graduates.
Yes.
Over 2 years. We need to keep focused on the success and how we increase that 30%, that 30 cents for every dollar. That's where we can maximize a lot of our revenues, and our faculty and our staff are absolutely crushing it in that area. And so if we can also, and I'm eager to come in and next strategy session tell you everything we're doing to maximize enrollment, make connections and all that, because there's a ton of excellent work taking place right now.
Yep.
And I think what you're hearing is the stress of, like, we just feel like expenses are climbing, and what are we gonna do when this deficit piece comes? That's, so I don't think any of us are not proud of the work, and so I think what you're just hearing today is that.
I didn't mean to say it was implied. I just want to, there's positive things happening.
But in our minds, we're like, okay, we're approving the budget, and
But you bring up a good point, because in these sessions, it is up to us to ask those questions, those hard questions. And so this is, but in the marketing, in the overall marketing of this district for the 2 campuses, that's where those things need to be put out. Look at what we're doing. Our success rate is huge, right? Look at what we're doing with our math and our English and this and that.
Yeah, we don't even have to go that far. We were rated what? Accreditation, as John said, thanks to the leadership.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very positive, you know,
It's very
I mean,
positive.
it's just like, you would want to go to Crafton Hills College or San Bernardino Valley College.
And
RCC
President
is doing a good job
Haran,
with it.
you can't take the pleasure of us being able to beat up Chancellor Torres. I mean, we look forward to that. We look
No,
forward to that.
that's cage match on. He's on his own.
Any other discussion? I think we have some action items.
We do.
I see a lot of notes there, all right, so that we can follow up on them. Our next session, unless we have some other comments or questions, is our meeting, when is our retreat?
Our retreat is, our next board meeting, that's what you want.
It's June 9th.
It's June 9th, that's the readout that you wanted.
Right, okay. So let's adjourn if there aren't any, are there any objections?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to note if, I came in a few moments late, and it may be that this has already been raised, and if so, it's been addressed, forgive me. But I haven't heard any reference, and I know it's not on the agenda, but Brown Act permits emergency situations. I would like to ask that we have a presentation, perhaps at the next meeting, perhaps it needs to be further out than that, I'm not sure, but on how is this institution prepared to respond to an active shooter? How are we,
Go ahead.
how are we prepared so that we are not surprised?
But it's my understanding that the board has had training. However, we're scheduling a refresher training as part of the retreat.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about for the on-campus, I mean, they're not training for us.
The campuses go through training.
Yeah.
They do training at least annually, sometimes once per semester. But I also believe that it's important that we have training should, God forbid, something happen during a board meeting, we all know how to respond.
Okay. I appreciate that, and I know we want to adjourn. I would like to include within, whenever we address this, within that, we have our own individual police department, but clearly we would be relying on external police forces. So I'd like to have us at some point be briefed on how we have worked this out or addressed this, institutional arrangements between us, city, county, whatever. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And I do want to compliment the Chancellor on having that briefing before our celebrations, before our commencement exercises with our police department and what had been already planned out and the measures that were taken. So that was very reassuring, and I want to thank you for that.
There was a very impressive, that's the experience that our chief has.
Yes.
He really knows how to maneuver things and strategize things. I was
that was good.
very happy to see that, Diana, taking the lead in regards to what happened 3 days ago.
And it sounds like it was already addressed, so again,
Well, not for the board and not for a board meeting. So there is a follow-up on it.
We will.
Yeah, there is a follow-up on that. Okay, so I'm going to adjourn the meeting, and the next board meeting is on June 9th at 4 PM in this, at this boardroom. Do I have to read the address? You all know how to get there. Okay, so meeting is adjourned. Thank you.